Good evening, Mr. Paul. This is your classmate, Brandy, and I wanted to go ahead and comment or do my response post on your discussion board. Why? Because why not? You were able to do mine, and I solely appreciate all that you had and your insight, so I figured I would hop on yours and see what we have here. Now, Mr. Paul, first and foremost, thank you so much for being so transparent with sharing your information. I know this is never the easiest to discuss, especially because we know each other's classmates, but just the fact that you were transparent enough to share is commendable, so I do appreciate that. A couple things stood out to me, Mr. Paul, in your response, due to the fact that you mentioned having burnout experiences or burnout times, both in your workplace and in your personal life. And I think that's a lot because for one person to handle so much is incredible. Um, Now, when you mentioned having a burnout due to lack of support from your employer, or like I guess the top staff, meaning like supervisors or things like that, I know too well about how that can be given that being a police officer formerly, chain of command isn't always on your side. So I do definitely understand when it comes to that. Also, too, when you mentioned like your current job now, due to the times of the pandemic, being having to be trained on telephone counseling, I think that's a stressor on its own. Like telephone, you can't really get that interactive face-to-face moments where I think that has its challenging challenges on its own. Now, another point you kind of hit me with was about personality disorder, which is why your job turned to telephone counseling or chose to direct it more towards that. Now, for me to refresh my memory, I did look into an article that explained a little bit further what personality disorder was. And this article was from, Palmer et al. It was a peer reviewed journal. The title of that journal was A Self Report Screening Instruments Differentiate Bipolar Disorder and Borderline Personality Disorder, published by Brain and Behavior. This one was actually found on page 2, and their definition was symptom domains of impulsivity, mood liability, and affective instability. Now, I knew what it was from undergrad, but to hear all that in one, I think just as a whole, if this was a face to face client dealing with that, that's a lot. So, telephone, I can only imagine. Um, Now, my next thing I noticed in your discussion post was how you explained your stressors, or really what kind of brought on a burnout with you. So, the fact that you're dealing with it in church with a pastor who's, not acting as such. Also, to just working in a job that does require more of you, as we are all one humans, we can only do so much. So, it's very demanding and asking, a lot of you on your job. Also, too, when you mentioned having to take care of your wife, that's very commendable to do. That's definitely something I want to thank you for sharing with. And then also too, just dealing with your own health issues with your foot. I mean, my goodness, I know too well about feet. I was, we won't even get into me, but just know I know very well about that. So I think when you shared that, it definitely kind of hit me personally because I can, relate to that. But just as a whole, you sharing that. So I wasn't noticing that you did say a couple ways of how you deal with like a self care plan and dealing with this. I think one way, which I found an article written by Deborah Christensen. This article was a peer reviewed journal from EBSCOhost. The title of that was How Will You Define Your New Normal, which was published by ONS Voice. This specific quote was found on page 1. And it kind of went over a couple things on how to deal with self care. So, this article was, again, your new normal, was based on our new normal, like the pandemic. And I think maybe a couple ways they suggested for some self care was taking advantage of mental health options offered by employers or national organizations. So, like our assignment, the resource guide, I do think Dr. Guman, gave that to us, not just for our clients, but for us ourselves. So I think in all the many ways that you're dealing with stressors, definitely look into some national organizations or maybe ones that are offered through your job to help out with this. But so far, it sounds like you have a plan down pat with dealing with everything. And on that note, I want to thank you again, Mr. Paul, for commenting on my post. And I do wish you be blessed in the rest of your program here. And if you have any admissions questions, let me know. Thanks, Mr. Paul. Bye bye.